Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 24th of October of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. You know that the conflict in Ukraine is a very complicated one, and sometimes it's impossible to understand what exactly is happening, what the Ukrainians are doing, what the Russians are tasked for. Sometimes words are not enough to explain everything. But you know that today one of the ministers of Ukraine made a very interesting statement, and this statement allowed me to understand this conflict, or at least the position of Ukraine, a bit better. Today he stated that the fewer power plants we have, the easier it is to protect them. It's simple logic. So for him, if Russians can destroy many power plants and just to keep 2 or 3, this is a very good scenario according to the Minister of Energy, because it would be much more easier for Ukraine to protect these 2 or 3 power stations. So as you can see, the Minister of Energy doesn't count the population and the opinion of population of Ukraine. For him, it's better to protect just power plants, 2 or 3 of them. Furthermore, we got another important report that today the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, came to United Kingdom and he met with the British Prime Minister in London. Most likely Zelensky went to London with the purpose to ask for more Storm Shadow missiles. I would like to remind you, according to information we have, several days ago Ukrainians destroyed the Bryansk chemical plant, and the sources are saying that Ukrainians were using Storm Shadow missiles. So most likely Zelensky went to the United Kingdom to ask for more missiles, for more attacks deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. But the problem is that the president of Russia, Putin, he warned the Western countries and he warned Ukraine and other countries that it's not a very good idea to attack deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation with cruise missiles. The Russians stated that they will strike back, and this attack will shock everyone. At the same time, we got report that the special representative of the Russian Federation came to the United States of America, and currently he's going to have a meeting with Witkoff. US presidential envoy Witkoff is expected to meet with Kirill Dmitriev today, Axios correspondent Barak Revit reports. So I would like to remind you that Kirill Dmitriev was head of delegation in Istanbul in Turkey when rounds of talks between Ukraine and the Russian Federation were taking place. Now he is coming to the United States of America, and most likely he is going to talk about sanctions. Most likely he was sent personally by Putin, and most likely he will bring a very interesting message to the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. So most likely very interesting things are ahead of us. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about very important update that was published from the southern part of Ukraine. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources reported that Russian Air Force deployed caps in Odessa Oblast for first time. So the Ukrainians are trying to tell us that the Russians attacked the Odessa Oblast not with missiles, not with drones. The Russians attacked this territory with bombs that were launched by Su-34, and these Su-34 need to fly very close to the line of combat contact. There are several options: either the Ukrainians don't have air defense system in the southern part of Ukraine at all, or the Russians managed to improve their bombs so much so they can launch them, let's say, from the territory of Jankoy. These bombs can cross hundreds of kilometers and attack the Odessa region, and these Su-34 would be completely protected from the Ukraine air defense fire. Anyway, this is a very interesting piece of news, because now Russians most likely will use bombs much often. They will attack the Odessa Oblast, which means that Ukrainians and Ukrainian military authorities will continue suffering huge problems in this area. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours we received lots of icons from this area, which means that the Russians are advancing. Let's talk about everything in details, and first let's talk about the southern direction. According to different neutral mappers, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their position significantly. We see clearly that the Russians are moving further in the western direction, and now the Russians are tasked to capture the settlements of Chervone, Zelený Gai, and Vesele. So this is the next task of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the Gulay-Polye direction. If Russians can capture this territory, then this is going to be already a very bad update, a very bad situation for the city of Gulay-Polye, because from these positions, Russians will continue outflanking the city of Gulay-Polye from the east and from the northeast. At the same time, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the Uspenovka fortified area. There are still very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians are trying to hold their positions. They're bringing additional forces, reinforcements, and reserves, but Russians destroy everything they see. So most likely the Uspenovka fortified area will stay for another day or two or for another week, but at the end this territory would be also abandoned by the Ukrainians, and Russians will continue their offensive operation further in the southwestern direction, also towards the settlement of Gulay-Polye. Furthermore, today the pro-Russian sources were talking about the Ministry of Defense, and different channels, different public channels of the group of forces East published this video where we can see how Russians were fighting for the settlement by the name of Zlagada, and this village was captured by Russians today. Here we can see how Russians were bombing the settlement with artillery, with aviation, how Russians were securing and clearing this territory with FPV drones, and in the final part of this video we can see at least 2 episodes when Russians raised their flag in different parts of the settlement. So based on this video, based on the report of the Minister of Defense, we adjusted the map. So now it's clear that after Russians captured the villages of Privilya and Zlagada, the Russians will continue their offensive operation further in the southern and the southeastern direction with the purpose to capture the Uspenovka fortified area, and then with these consolidated positions, the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the direction of the city by the name of Gulay-Polye. By the way, the city of Gulay-Polye is the final task of the entire Zaporozhye offensive operation, at least of its eastern part, because if Ukrainians lose the city of Gulay-Polye, telling the truth, I have no doubts that the Russians at the end would lose the city of Orekhov and all these towns and settlements almost until the city of Zaporozhye, which is the capital of the entire Zaporozhye region. And telling the truth, with this pace of offensive, most likely, if the special military operation doesn't end this year or at the beginning of the next year, most likely somewhere in August or autumn of 2026, the Russians will be able to approach the city of Zaporozhye itself. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we continued receiving lots of updates from this territory. Once again, a lot of flags. Furthermore, we got report that the Russians issued ultimatum to Ukrainians that they have time until Monday of 27th of October of 2025. The Russians are giving them just 3 days for evacuation, and 1 day has almost been finished. So Ukrainians either need to evacuate their soldiers under very heavy fire from the Russian side, or the Ukrainians would be caught in cauldron without any chances for evacuation. For example, during the previous 24 hours, we adjusted the map in the eastern part of the city of Pokrovsk. This is the situation by the end of the 23rd of October of 2025. Most of this territory is to be considered as a gray zone or contested area. Now the Russians managed to reduce this contested area in their favor based on the video that was published by Ukrainian sources. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians of 68th Jaeger Brigade were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation on the territory of the city of Pokrovsk in its different parts. One of these attacks took place exactly at this point. Another attack took place to the north of the railways at this point. So as you can see, the Russians have almost captured the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk, and furthermore, the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense and to enter the northern part of the city, which is already the biggest disaster ever. Furthermore, we have reports that the Russians continue improving their positions on the western and the northwestern flanks of the city of Pokrovsk, and today lots of territories were captured in this area as well. So as you can see, the pro-Russian resources are making huge changes on the ground, and according to them, by the end of the 23rd of October of 2025, the Russians, by the end of the 24th of October of 2025, the Russians managed to capture all these territories, which means that that Ukrainians lost possibilities to supply and support their contingent on the territory of the Pokrovsk agglomeration from the west. The only way the Ukrainians can do this is using the Olympiyska Street, but this street is under complete Russian fire control, and telling the truth, I'm not sure that this is a very good idea to use this road. Ukrainians, telling the truth, have no chances. They need to evacuate, and we believe that during these 3 nights, these 3 upcoming nights, between 24th and 25th, between 25th and 26th, and between 26th and 27th of October, the Ukrainians will try to evacuate as many as possible soldiers, troops from this territory, and this is going to be the end. Most likely they will not be able to evacuate everybody, and the Russians would encircle them, and it will take probably Russians 1, 2 or 3 weeks to finish the clearing operation, and then Russians will be able to enter the operational space of the Donetsk region and to continue offensive operation further in the northern and the northwestern directions. Furthermore, today we got reports that Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Promin. This information today was reported by pro-Russian resources by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. Furthermore, the 7th Military Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine published this video how Russians were attacking the eastern part of the settlement of Mirnograd and how Ukrainians were repelling those attacks. Furthermore, pro-Russian sources reported that Russians improved their position significantly in the city of Mirnograd, and today, according to information we have, the Russians captured the Mirnogradskaya southern mine, this one, and the Russians continue advancing. So we believe that in coming hours the Russians will finish the battle for the entire southern Mirnograd, and this is going to be probably a turning point in the process of retreat. After this moment, Ukrainians will start running very fast from the settlement, otherwise they would be caught in cauldron. At the same time, the Russians continue their pressure in the city of Rodinska. Today, a few more blocks were captured by Russians, and they're trying to get to the road 0515 during these hours and during these even minutes, because obviously, even if Ukrainians decide to evacuate from the city of Pokrovsk during these 3 nights, upcoming nights, obviously the Russians would try to do everything they can with the purpose to make this process for Ukrainians as much as possible unpleasant. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Siversk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very interesting updates. Today, some pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the front is bursting at the seams, and there is a threat of losing Dnipro, Zaporozhye, Kharkiv and Sumy, says Ukrainian Valentin Berlitskaya. So she's trying to tell us that the situation for Ukraine is very difficult, and Zelensky has just one option to get these cruise missiles and to attack and to destroy everything between Moscow and the border with Ukraine. So we'll see whether the Keir Starmer is going to provide him missiles, but as of now the Russians continue advancing. As for the city of Siversk, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly, so let's discuss everything in detail. Today, pro-Ukrainian sources published video from fields between Vyemka and the settlement of Kuzminovka-Zvanovka. We will not watch this video due to violence, but according to this video, the Russians improved their positions. So as we can see, according to all these updates, the Russians are finishing the battle for the pocket between Vyemka, Kuzminovka and Zvanovka, and when Russians finish the battle for this pocket, when they will be able to maintain the lines, they will continue offensive operation towards the city of and the village of Zvanovka. So the southern flank of the city of Siversk is about to be captured by Russians, and when Russians finish with this, they will continue offensive operation in the northern direction. Furthermore, we had report from the settlement of Dronovka. Today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Dronovka. Based on the report that was published by the Group of Forces South and by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we adjusted the map. So the Russians finished the battle for this territory, and they answered the operational space of the Siversk direction. Now, from the village of Dronovka, the Russians would continue offensive towards Pankovka, and Russians would continue offensive operation towards the city of Siversk, but this time from the north. So I'm not sure for how long the Ukrainians would be able to hold their positions in this area, but it seems that in 2025 is the final year when Ukrainians control the city of Siversk and when this city is under their control, most likely Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this territory very soon. The Ukrainians are trying to bring additional forces, reinforcements and reserves in this direction, but Russians control the fields and airspace between Siversk, Liman and Slaviansk, and everything that enters this space can be destroyed by Russians within minutes, or maybe within hours, but it will be destroyed and will not be able to get the final destination point, the city of Siversk. Now let's talk about the city of Liman. The situation here is also very difficult. Today several sources reported that the Russians continued advancing. The Russians captured few more strongholds in fields and trenches. Furthermore, some sources reported that the Russians answered the city of Liman itself and managed to dig in deeper. So for the first time since the beginning of the battle, since the beginning of the third battle for the city of Liman, we got report that the Russians managed not just to answer the city of Liman, but also to dig in deeper. Most likely the sources are talking about this part, about this micro district of Maslyakivka. Furthermore, the Russians continue holding their positions around the settlement of Drobyshevo. The Ukrainians used to use this territory for logistics because Ukrainians have lots of pontoon crossings, river crossings in this area, but most of them are going through the settlement of Svyatogorsk. So these are approximately the roads for supply and support that Ukrainians used to have during the previous period of time. But now Ukrainians are no longer able to use these roads because Russians cut them in the south or to the west of the settlement of Drobyshevo. So the sources are saying that there are up to 3 battalions in the area of Liman, which most likely could be caught in cauldron by Russians in coming days. Now let's discuss the situation in the Kupiansk direction. Today a few more sources confirmed that Ukrainians were caught in cauldron on the territory of the northwestern and the western parts of the city of Kupiansk. The Ukrainians are trying to bring additional forces to unblock Ukrainians, but everything that enters this Kupiansk kill zone can be destroyed immediately. So in this video we can see how Russian drone attacked another vehicle of the armored forces of Ukraine on the territory of the Kupiansk kill zone. In the northern direction, another vehicle of the armored forces of Ukraine, another 2 more vehicles of the armored forces of Ukraine entered another kill zone with the purpose to land infantry and to capture some logistic roads. In this video we can see these 2 M113 infantry fighting carriers, but they were damaged and destroyed by Russian FPV drones. Ukrainians managed to land infantry, but that was something like one-way ticket. So kill zone of Kupiansk cannot be penetrated by Ukrainian vehicles, and everything that enters is being destroyed immediately. As for the Kharkiv direction, during the previous 12 hours, 24 hours, the most important updates are coming from the settlement of Balogovka. This video was published by the Group of Forces North, and here we can see how Russians managed to establish complete control over this settlement. We can see almost reduced to a ruined settlement, and in the final part of this video 2 soldiers, Russian soldiers, raised their flags. So based on this video we adjusted the map. This is the situation by the end of the 23rd of October, and this is the situation by the end of the 24th of October. We see that the Russians are about to connect these 2 footholds, one of them along the river Voskol and another one along the border. So most likely in coming days we will color this territory in Russian favor, and then Russians, using their broad frontline attack, will continue advancing deep inside of the Kharkiv region. As for the Volchansk direction, the Russians, according to information we have, finished the battle for the western part of the city. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. Ukrainians are trying to stabilize the situation in this area as well. They are sending more and more vehicles, more and more infantry fighting carriers to stabilize the situation, but this is another kill zone, but this time this is the Volchansk kill zone. Everything that enters this kill zone has no chances to finish their mission successfully. Furthermore, the Russians launched another offensive operation, but this time on the eastern flank, on the eastern part of the city of Volchansk. The Russians are about to cross the river of Volcha and to answer the villages of Ovchansky Hutory, Pokolyane and Zybina. So it seems that this front line will collapse in coming days. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.